This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me, I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
What is poppin', everybody, and welcome back to another special episode of the Only Friends podcast. Well, you know, I'm here with Tortu! Everybody throw your maracas up in the chat.
Do we have maracas in there?
What are these things?
Maracas.
Oh, they are called maracas. I said Morocco's, right?
Yeah,
Morocco.
Is that a country?
Morocco is
Morocco is a country, yes. They were almost won the World Cup.
Oh, yeah.
almost.
That's right. That's right.
I have two questions. One, do we even have a maraca emoji in the chat?
No.
And two, you literally ran to the other side of the room before the intro.
That was actually impressive.
This is not a question. This is a statement. That's number one.
I was finishing my question.
You didn't have a question here.
Oh, I did.
What was it?
You ran across the room to get the maraca?
Well, that's just plain out stupid since you see me grab the maraca and run back.
What's going on here? Today is the most unhinged day of the podcast, I think.
Perfect. That's how we like it. Let's do it.
What is poppin', Berkey? What you doing out there in LA?
Wait, I don't. What is going on with you guys, man? I leave for 10 minutes, and the whole thing just falls apart. You're 3 seconds away from the intro, running and grabbing what I can only assume you believe to be a wind instrument to do your tortua bit.
It is a fiddle. It's true.
Fiddles are. You know what? I'm not even. We have better things to talk about today and every day thereafter. As a matter of fact, I think today is the day that we cancel Conrad from the show.
All right.
It's been
Conrad.
a good run.
Yep.
It's been a good run. You've been a great hype guy.
It's been fun.
The Tortua bit has run its course. And until you come up with a new one, you're just on timeout. So go ahead and mute his mic, Guapo. We're going to talk about strategy today, so he doesn't have any.
Oh, don't worry. My mic's muted then. Don't worry.
He'll break in with a little bit of laugh every now and again when we're talking about the Lennies and the tight tads that are out here in the live streets trying to bluff and bluff catch. But before we get to all that, I want to give a couple updates with regards to what we were talking about. Was it 2 days ago? When was the last time I was on the podcast? Monday?
2 days ago.
Yeah, 2 days ago. We had received some intel from Mr. Darkside himself that solvers were being used in a live game. And we spoke about it a little bit. Huge shout out to the poker boss, Sean McCormick. Mm-hmm. He took to Twitter and he said, regarding solvers or any other apps being used to assist players, they are 100% not permitted at MGM Resorts International properties. Please bring to the attention of management. We will address. We'll make sure this info is then retrained and disseminated to all staff. So it looks like it's being handled, which is all that we could really ask for, to be quite honest. Always appreciate Sean jumping on it. He also said, me and my limited filter will be happy to jump on the podcast someday. Would love to have him, of course.
Yeah, the main takeaway from that tweet is another amazing Only Friends pod.
We're out here keeping the streets safe, man.
Yeah, we got you.
But I got this screenshot from JP Poker, who I think is taking to the vlogging streets these days, and he was playing a little 510 at Bellagio yesterday, and we got another over-the-shoulder shot of a man looking at GTO Wizard. Now, in this situation, so this is where I think the conversation should end, probably for us.
Agreed.
In this situation, this guy's not in the hand. And, I was kind of talking to Jamin about it this morning, and he was like, this is such a bad look. It's so bad for the game, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, look, man, I understand all the old pros who grew up in the boom who think that we need to keep industry secrets hush-hush, and that, recreationals are the dumbest people alive. And, in order to facilitate a gambling environment, we can't possibly let them know that people play poker seriously. But that's just not the case anymore. Like, recreationals subscribe to GTO Wizard. Mm-hmm. Probably a lot of them, actually, because GTO Wizard is a very big company and it's very widespread. So, this is harmless. This is like when Snap Shove came out and people would look at their jamming ranges in between hands. Who gives a shit? Looking something up is not the same as inherently knowing it, or more importantly, understanding the root reason for why hands are playing the way that they play. Don't get me wrong, like, of course this is going to advance the game and people are going to get better, but that's just the nature of the beast anyway. That's already happening. And I think that I don't know, man. Like, I've been in the live realm my entire career, and I've seen it evolve. I understand that it's not the same game as it was 10 years ago, and I think there are a lot of live players who are still clinging to that. And it's the live players that I actually like look to in some regard as guys who know how to cultivate a gambling environment, guys who really understand how to play up the role of being an action reg and things like that. So there's a lot that this collective that I'm speaking about does incredibly well, and I don't think that should be overlooked. Like, it is really important to create a social environment where people are happy to splash around and lose some money. But I think what comes with having your eye on the prize when it comes to curating an environment is you overlook some things that just can't be helped. And like, these charts are here to stay. These lookup databases are here to stay. We all have a computer in our fingertips with our phones. So like, what people do out of the hand to me is completely irrelevant. And like, sure, if a shit reg gets caught looking at, GTO Wizard in between hands, he should be made fun of a little bit. I think that's completely reasonable. It's not a good look. It's not something you want your neighbors to necessarily know that you're doing, but it's silly this day and age to pretend like you're actually playing 5-10 or higher and don't know what equilibrium even means.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why it's such a big deal, at least in the live environment, is optically it just looks pretty bad, because when you shift it to online, this has been commonplace for years and isn't going to go away when it comes to people looking at charts either after they make a decision or in some cases even mid-hand. But there's that secret of behind closed doors because you're playing in a protected environment by yourself. But live, when you can see other people can see it, and kind of removes the sneakiness of it, if you will. It's not like it's going to disappear, but at the same time, kind of making some sort of statement be known at the table seems like a very reasonable thing.
Shame. I think we should shame them. Yes. Treat it like you would if you saw somebody like angling or something like. I'm not saying it is an angle, but it's kind of like.
I don't want to blow it out of proportion either.
No, I don't want to blow it out of proportion.
People to feel uncomfortable.
Just kind of maybe you just make fun of them, and then they're like, well, maybe I don't want to pull my chart out here and have to deal with half the table, coming down on me.
What do you think the big downside is?
I don't know if that's a permanent solution, but
What'd you say, Burke?
What do you think the big downside is?
Of like calling them out.
Chart, like pulling up GTO Wizard.
We're specifically talking in between hands, right, Burke?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. The main downside, I think, is turning off people that don't play professional. Well, even maybe people that anybody that's not doing it, turning them off to the game. I think that's the.
I mean, it's funny because like
the biggest downside.
How many people that aren't doing it are going to even notice what you're doing? Like, I'd say maybe 20-30%.
Yeah, it's not like everyone's just like looking at everyone's phone, like when they're on their phone, like looking over and like, hey, what's that person doing? Is he texting somebody, or is he looking up a solve?
Yeah. I see arguments for both sides, because bringing it up and kind of making it known that this is available can be a turnoff. But also at the same time, if people don't know what's going on and you don't bring it up, it's one of those things where the people that are in-house know what's happening. And if you're in-house and you know what's happening, it's not like it can be stopped, at least in that regard. It's different if there's rulings that say that you can't use software at the table. Someone pulls out software and then you try to police it. But at the same time, policing it becomes a very tough situation because some people are going to get caught. Some people have screen protectors on their phone. Some people are smarter about doing it. So
I mean, I think the threat of being caught and being punished can go a long way.
But we're talking about in between hands.
You guys are convoluting the argument. You're talking about in hand versus out of hand.
Yeah, we're talking about in between hands here.
Right. Well, I mean, you could just make a rule that you're just not allowed. Like, while you're at the table, you're not allowed to use that kind of software.
Why?
But
That's
like,
what I'm asking. What's the downside in between hands?
There is no downside, honestly. Like, it's just personal upside for the person that's doing it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any downside
I mean,
to do stuff like this in between hands, honestly. I kind of had a different take in when we previously talked about this like a few months ago. But after, like, I play a lot of MTTs, and it's like you don't get anything really out of it. Like, you just get a better understanding of your spot maybe next time. But, like, it's just like live. I don't know.
I think that that's the biggest part to take away from here is that the people who are looking this stuff up aren't the dangerous players at the table. Like, Landon doesn't need to look up a spot.
Right. But that's also not true because Landon is looking up spots when he's like halfway onshore.
Right, because he's curious and everything else. But like, if no one at the table knew Landon was good, do you think he would be foolish enough to like look up a spot?
Yeah, absolutely. Without anybody knowing? Like, he's just on his phone. It's like,
bro, 2 days in a row, there's been a picture taken of somebody doing this. You're not getting away with it. Like, it doesn't happen without people noting. You're playing 8 and 9 handed. People are going to see.
Yeah.
So that's my point.
I would have zero intention of ever pulling up like a solve while I'm playing, or like at the table. Like, just.
Well, I guess my point is it signals somebody is weak, not strong. Like, I think it means that they are just
unsure of themselves,
very unsure. Yeah, very unsure of themselves and need confirmation.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, it's just like Landon. It's funny because before the podcast, Guap and I were talking about a few hands, and then we were just like, we were like looking at some pre-flop charts, and it was like, oh yeah, Landon said this, and Landon said, like, Landon just knows these, like, he inherently knows all the pre-flop stuff pretty clearly. So it's like, yeah, he doesn't need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak for myself here. Like, I definitely look up stuff after playing hands or after looking at like a post-flop spot or situations like that. But prior to a hand happening, I'm not necessarily looking for like my next RFI from cutoff.
RFI is race versa.
Right. Yeah. So when it comes to all of that stuff, I'm sort of looking, not even like in the necessary to double check, but sort of the curiosity as to seeing if like the ideas I had in the first place were correct, which they normally are. But at the same time, it's not like the amount of EV gained in that situation is going to be so great. And it generally comes from a sense of curiosity, because I know a lot of other very good, like elite high stakes players who also look up stuff after hands are done, but never do it during a hand.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference between during and after. And I think a lot of people that are actually good at poker look up stuff after hands.
I guess it is kind of like along the lines of someone who bum hunts or moves seats or tries to get position on the fish. Like, they need to do that because they can't win otherwise. Whereas, or they would win much more, I guess. But
but those things that you're describing are predatory. I don't think that this is. I think this has been happening since the first hand of poker was ever dealt. It's just happening at a more accurate level now.
It used to happen through text message.
Or people would just coach other people after the hand.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, that hand's supposed to fold, or that hand is supposed to call, or what are you doing? Helmuth does this every time he sits at a table. I shove all in for 150 big blinds, and these two idiots call me with ace king. It's like, the idea of like somebody coaching the table,
right,
or informing the table of what the quote unquote correct play is, has been happening since hand one.
Yeah.
And it's never been more than an eye roll thing.
The only difference now when it comes to these tools and softwares is that it becomes automated for the individual. There's a difference between back in the day when someone had a software and didn't have quote unquote remote PC or whatever. They would talk to a friend and ask for a chart, and a couple hands later, or whenever their friend got around to it, they'd send them a picture of the chart. Right? So all of these things still exist. It's just a matter of the speed in which you get the information.
Right.
Yeah, and the accuracy as well. But to that end, I still don't think that out of the hand is something we want to be policing. It's way, way too big of an ask for card rooms, and you just don't gain that much.
Yeah.
Like
No, I
this
think that's
notion
fair.
that you're going to scare away the weakest players, it's just not true. If
Mhm.
you're in a 1-3 game and somebody's looking up charts, who cares? You're playing 1-3. Like there just aren't going to be people who are so intimidated that they're going to leave. And if they are that way, then they were likely very intimidated just by the sheer casino environment to begin with.
Yeah, and
so
I
like,
think
look, good.
I was just gonna say, maybe in time this won't be true, but I would think now, anything under 510, it's gonna be probably pretty rare to actually see somebody be doing this. Like,
Right, and when you-
we've
and when you
seen
start-
it, we've seen it, and it's always been like 510 plus.
Right.
Yeah.
When you start talking about 5-10 plus, the weakest players in those games aren't there because they're afraid of losing money.
Right.
Right. The weakest players in those games are there for recreation and want to gamble. So
Exactly.
the
They know
notion-
they're gonna be up against good players.
Yeah, the notion that they're against a pro who might know a lot more than them isn't intimidating. It's
Yeah.
what they're there for.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
So good.
No, I think you're right. Like when it comes to playing high stakes poker, and I would consider playing 5-10 live plus is high stakes poker. People know that when they sit down and start playing for fun, that they are inherently taking the worst of it. In some regards, if someone tells you, yeah, I'm a pro and I play here X amount of times per week.
I think all that changes if somebody's doing it in a hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
In hand, now you're actively trying to gain EV when there's still EV, an action for you to have. But when the action's gone and you're just trying to automate the process for yourself, it's too hard to police.
Yeah. It's like
Well, I
we played-
think you made the best point the
Yeah.
other day when you said there would be no difference between being a human and a bot at that point. Right? You're just completely automated to just following whatever the chart says.
Right. The beauty of poker is it's my mind versus your mind, and then you just
Mm.
take that away if someone's just looking at a solve mid hand.
Somebody said, isn't MGM's announcement indicative that they won't allow it in the room between hands?
No.
No.
Sean
okay.
clarified that in the thread.
Okay.
It's just in the hand.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
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 Yep.
And I mean, this is going to be tricky to police. It's going to take some self-reporting. It's going to take some, management amongst the players to ensure that this is overseen. Because dealers aren't that incentivized. You tip them, so they're not exactly looking to yell at people for using software or being on their phone even in the middle of a hand.
I'm kind of curious how big of a problem this really is at the moment, as compared to like just nipping it in the butt now.
It's not that it is a problem, I don't think. I think it's that it could be a problem.
Yeah.
And also it's the sentiment that nobody wants to play with these people.
Yeah.
Right?
Of course.
Like it's annoying because it's like in a lot of instances it's not that they're gaining an upper hand, but it's more so that they're minimizing what they would already be losing.
Yeah. I think right now too the rule is, well, I mean, Sean, kind of clarified it, but before that the rule was, I think it was gray. We didn't know, I think people were just like, oh, I can do this. Like there's not a hard stance rule against it. And once there is, and I think that's widely known, I think the majority of people who would think about doing it or would want to do it might just not, because it's like, okay, this is clearly against the rules, and I want to, most people play by the rules.
It's weird.
I mean, it's not going to eradicate it, but like, I think once, because like there's other rules, I can't think of an exact example, but there are other rules where it's just like, this is a rule now, and it's just like nobody breaks it, right? Or at least most people.
Well, this has always been a rule. I don't know if you remember, but maybe 5 or 6 years ago, Jason McConnon was at a televised WSOP table with printouts of range charts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just open, and they came and policed it. So,
Yeah.
like, I mean, this has always been a thing. You were never allowed to look at snap shove during a hand. You were never allowed to have preflop ranges in front of you.
Yeah.
And it was just a misapplication by the manager at the time.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because, like, I feel like I don't think I ever do like see people like, you know, looking at opening charts and stuff like that in MTTs or anything like that. Like I don't think I've ever seen anything.
There's a pretty hard rule in tournaments that you're not allowed to be on your phone in the middle of the hand.
During the hand.
So it's like it's not gonna like in tournaments. The dealer's gonna be like, you can't be on your phone.
But like even looking at somebody with 30 big blinds next to me, right? And it's right before they act or something. I'm very nosy. I always look at people's screens.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And like I never see like
someone like checking
like
the chart
opening
is.
charts or like something like that.
Right.
I don't know. I've never seen it. But what I have been seeing is the fucking timer running on people's phones. They try to get that fucking randomization. Just look down instead of looking for the
guy was
clock.
openly doing it at the table at the win. He was just like, well, he's like, I'm just going to randomize whether I call you or not here.
It's the same person probably. He just literally has a timer running on his phone.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of whatever, right? Because you can use chip shuffling. You can use the fucking...
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, I haven't seen much of anything like this in MTTs, really.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's happening, but...
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, this is just the evolution of technology, and we're going to have to live with it. I don't think it's not as big of a deal as we're making it out to be. It's just optically very bad for live poker, in my opinion.
Right.
And I think this is an opportunity to set a precedence and ensure that we don't head down that slippery slope of people just like running real-time assistance during a live game at some point in time.
It's interesting just from like the vantage point of looking at, call it something like a chess tournament versus a poker tournament, where if you tried to take everybody's phones away at a poker tournament, it would just never ever work, and the game would become a lot smaller. Where in chess, that's just a very known thing. You just don't get information while you're playing the match. But it's just never going to be able to be replicable.
It's an apples to oranges comparison, though. It's not a fair one. First of all, chess tournaments are very small. They're mano a mano. And second of all, chess is a very dependent game. So every single move is dependent upon the last. And you could take a bathroom break, look on your phone, and map out the remaining game based off of the moves that have been made. Every hand is independent of the last in poker. It's completely irrelevant if you get information on the last hand as far as the next hand that you play.
Yeah, that's fair.
And it's more of a social game. Like taking your phone away, I don't think. I know.
Yeah, I'm definitely not calling for taking phones away.
Yeah, I didn't think you were, Landon.
I know in theory that would imply that like it would become more social, but I think the opposite would actually happen. Like we need multiple outlets. We can't just be stuck with the 7 people or 8 people surrounding us.
Imagine not being able to watch IG reels while you're at the table.
I know.
I mean, we kind of find most of our social topics from our phones anyway when we're at the table.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of the talking points come from people just like scrolling Twitter or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So other things before we get to Strat Chat, which has now been moved to Wednesdays due to our Tuesday rendezvous with the No Gamble No Future boys. We are we're sweating the start of Triton today. So Triton kicked off today. They partnered with GG Poker for this one. And have a Super Millions live with one of the bigger fields that Triton's actually kicked off with. So it looks as though this is a record-breaking first event, 25K buy-in, 166 entries, which I'm kind of surprised that's a record for them.
I mean, you got to think about it. All the other buy-ins at Triton, I feel like they always been like 100K plus and like maybe like 125K, 150K. Like I don't think
no. They always do a bunch of 25Ks. It's just that's the minimum buy-in, and it's clearly geared towards the high roller player pool.
Are they doing more of them this year? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the total schedule, but it seems as though the partnership with GG has brought in a lot of satellite winners.
Yeah.
And also,
really nice,
I believe ACR was sending people there as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure ACR sent at least 10 people to Triton. So
it was nice to hear Henry's voice. Mr. Kilbane out there again.
He's out there crushing the commentary streets. I think if they start to replicate like the Poker Go series, where it's adding some more 10Ks and 25Ks alongside the 100K, 250K, whatever the main events are that they do, they'll start to. It's kind of important, right? Because you want to start to cultivate this high roller scene. You can't just be stuck with the same 30 guys.
Agreed.
that are vying for 3 or 4 recreationals that are willing to pony up. You need to have new blood circulating through, winning a couple 10Ks here and there, thinking they could take a shot. Like Jesse Lonis is a great example. If he didn't have the opportunity to play some 10Ks and have some success there, he probably doesn't necessarily dip his toes into the 25K field and the 50K field, etc. Right?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
At the end of day one, which just wrapped up not that long ago, Jonathan Jaffe is leading the tournament with 3.365 million in chips. That's good for 112 big blinds. Jonathan's one of the OGs. Used to be IF Tari online. I've known him since way back in the Turning Stone days. Always a bit of a blaster, so happy to see him at the top of the ranks. I think Patrick Antonius is second in chips. First place will probably be, 166 people. So that's like
950.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably close to. There's about 3 million in the prize pool.
950K for first.
Okay, I would have guessed 1 million. That's good. So yeah, it looks like this is going to be a big series. It all kicked off though with a tribute to former founder, or I guess kicked off to a tribute to founder Ivan Leow, who passed away last year at the Cyprus stop. Ali Najad did a very nice tribute to Ivan. I think we're going to roll the clip for that now.
I think it is only fitting to talk about the loss, really the glaring absence of the energy of Ivan Leow, our beloved founding member of the Triton Poker Series. Just such a respected and admired member of the Triton family. Clearly not going to be joining us here, having passed away late last year at that Cyprus stop, which cut our stop short. But in honor of Ivan and Ivan's passing, we do have some announcements, Randy, in terms of our Player of the Year.
Yeah, and we have renamed it to the Ivan Leow Player of the Year Award, which is very understandable. He was he was friends with the founding, very close to them. He put in his time. I heard that whenever they want to discuss how can we improve Triton events, Ivan was raising his hand like, hey, listen, maybe we should do these things. He was playing the events. It was very lively.
I think it is only fitting to talk about the
Very nice tribute there by Ali and Nananoku. Triton is going to rename their Player of the Year award, as they mentioned, in honor of Ivan. I had the pleasure of playing with him a couple of times. Really nice, down-to-earth kind of guy. Very soft-spoken and, not boisterous or anything along those lines. Sad to hear him go. It's a tough thing to know that a guy in his early 40s in the gym can just, get on a treadmill and never get off. That's a very humbling thing to see as somebody who prides himself in health and physical fitness, to see somebody who, for all intent and purposes, seemed to be incredibly healthy, just never make it out of that gym. So good on Triton for, honoring him. I'm sure that there's a bit of a heavy feeling there, being this is the first event that they've ran since Cyprus. But from all things that we can tell, this is going to be a massive event moving forward, and his name's always going to be attached to it.
Yeah. Love it. Something like basically Mike Sexton. Absolutely love tributes to people that, put in the time, the effort.
Yeah, Sexton's another great example. He was really revolutionary when it came to being the voice of the WPT, but people don't realize he was one of the founders of Party Poker, and he helped get that brand off the ground and also bring the online sponsorship into the live realm. Like, he was a big part of bridging the gap between Party and WPT. Yeah, in the early goings.
I didn't know. I didn't really know how much impact he had until I don't know, maybe it was last year I started looking into it, and it was just this is pretty cool. I'm glad that we kind of lift those people up.
Yeah,
I agree. Final news and notes. Philboard's back, baby. The 10 million guarantee, massive overlay on GG that Daniel threatened to pay any amount over the guarantee that they made. it overlaid, as to be expected. And Philbort, the one and only Philip Gruesome, one of the OG Germans, came back from retirement to win it for $800,000.
Wow.
I'm just glad.
64,000 runners in this thing.
Wait, what was the buy-in for that?
$150.
Wow.
Yeah, $150. So they needed to get 75,000. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, they were
To- yeah,
11,000
to make
players
it.
short. That's pretty sick.
It is pretty sick.
That's
It's
a
pretty
dope
sick
tournament. GG's doing some crazy things, man.
I mean, it's
They-
good marketing. You know, they put up a solid $1 million in guarantee there. Strong. I mean, you know, and how lucky to get a face of the game in OG like this to be the guy who wins it, to represent, you know, to further promote these types of events and things of that nature. I think it's pretty strong, man. To run an online tournament where first is 800K, when we were in the pre-Black Friday days when everything was booming, this was unheard of. The biggest event was like the Poker Stars Sunday Million anniversary, which was like $250,000 to first. And that might have even been a 10 million guarantee. They just, you know, they paid very small percentage to first. Nah, that's not true.
Wow, this makes sense. So, January 16th, 2023, he tweets, "I'm back in the game. After getting a baby and opening up the stable, I discovered I still want to play and challenge myself to new heights. Poker never lets me go, so there must be something more in it for me." So clearly the baby run good is real, and now he's won his, he's utilized his baby run good for the infinite ROI in a 150. So it sounds like we all need to have some children.
Do you think he just knew? Like, oh fuck, man, I had a kid. I gotta play like the biggest thing I can play right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, right? That's how it works.
The biggest thing.
The biggest thing-
$150 GG.
No, he meant
tournament.
field wide. Biggest
like-
field.
No, I'm
Yeah.
joking. I'm joking.
Yeah. I mean,
Anybody can win a 30-man, you know, 250K high roller, but like, you know, who can win a 65,000-man field? That is very
somebody with a
difficult
child.
to do. It's
Sure.
much harder to win that tournament than it is to win any high roller that's out there.
It is
Yeah.
it is scary when these massively high variance events are won by really good players, because
Mhm.
it starts to demonstrate
It
how
is scary, yeah.
critical. Well, it just starts to demonstrate how critical the end game is in MTTs.
Well, I mean, we see it now in the main event, right? The main event, is just always the final table is always filled with really great players.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot to be said when you're playing for higher stakes with less big blinds as a whole, and not making mistakes when it comes to rejamming or finding 3-bets or finding ways to be all in certain spots based off of ICM or chip EV, and then playing those spots extremely well, and a step above competition where people might be playing some spots and not realizing that an open in one spot is actually a massive mistake based off of future implications. So getting good at ICM is definitely important and is not just for poor people.
It's very tricky to qualify or quantify, I should say, because the thing is, like, we can recognize what a mistake is, but we can't necessarily understand the impact of it because there's this like overlaying layer of variance, right? So a specific hand that comes to mind during that 5K in Florida that I got second in, there was a spot where Coleman he either raised called off or he open jammed. I can't recall. I think he might have open jammed like 15, and somebody called with king queen in like a pretty big ICM spot.
This is
He
final
had
table.
2 10s. Yeah, this is like 5 left. He had 2 10s and ended up losing the flip. And he was talking to Landon afterwards. He's like, that is a fucking ICM torch. Like, he's just lighting so much money on fire there. And it's like, well, yeah, he kind of is. Or I mean, like, according to the ICM model, of course he is. But like half the time, maybe not half the time, because his range obviously isn't just 10s, but like some percentage of the time, due to the equity of king queen as a whole, that mistake goes unrealized. And the issue in poker is that percentage of the time that the mistake goes unrealized is actually relatively high, right? It's generally going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 35 to 50% of the time a mistake is actually rewarded.
Yeah.
And also, like, when it is, like, when it goes unpunished, like, when, I'm not unpunished, but, like, when it is, when that king queen does double up there, it's just like they win the tournament a lot too. Like this,
It wasn't doubling up; it was busting him. But it's not that they win the tournament a lot, but you definitely you now benefit from the mistake directly, right? Whereas and everybody else does as well because now someone's busted. So like you move up the ladder in the chip rankings, your expectation is now to finish higher in the event than it was prior to the hand. And then on top of it, you know, everybody around you has just made money as well.
Yeah, that's why we really like Marley's video with chucking IOUs at the person
I was
who
actually thinking about that.
lost a flip, right?
Yeah.
Like you lose a flip, you're actually winning thousands of dollars from jamming there and then getting called because the person that's losing in that high stakes environment at an FT is the one that is kind of losing the most. That you get the lion's share of the benefit because your hand is worth that. But at the same time, when you lose, you are now out. So now you need some more IOUs to pay for your theoretical rent. Your very real rent.
Your real rent. The IOUs don't pay for it.
Theoretical dollars for real rent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's facts. All right, let's get to a topic of conversation that I'm confident the tortoise can speak on.
Yes.
We might even be able to unmute old Connie a little bit for this one because he's really been out in the live streets. But let's talk about bluff catching and how to really bluff catch like a live pro. In the title, I said how to bluff catch like a pro, but what I meant was how to bluff catch like a live pro. Because how to bluff catch like a pro is boring. It's just knowing where the threshold of equity lies in which you're supposed to call a bet versus fold. It's pot odds, you know? It's understanding the worth of your hand because it can either beat worse value, which means you're no longer bluff catching, you just have a hand of value, or it only beats bluffs and, you know, it's effectively a zero EV hand. When these things happen in a kind environment like online, you just call it the frequency that you're supposed to call and fold at the frequency you're supposed to fold. Now, obviously, developing that skill set is a challenge in and of itself, but once you have a knack for it, it becomes quite boring in the sense that your error rate is relatively low and you're just going to perform in accordance to how close to equilibrium the pool performs, right? But live's a different animal, guys. Some people
you get to look at
never
people
bluff.
live.
Yeah, that's true. That is that. I would make this statement a lot, but I'll go on record here on the podcast to say this with a bullet next to it. I truly don't think that any hands in a general live environment, like a live environment that will have average players in it, I truly don't believe that there are very many zero EV spots. Almost all situations where you're put into a spot to bluff catch is going to either be plus EV because you're facing someone who overbluffs, or negative EV because you're facing somebody who doesn't find the bluffs.
You're just no one's balanced enough. No, in these realms, is that what you're saying? That no one's has the perfect amount of value versus bluffs. It's very hard to do.
Well, of course, nobody's practically balanced ever anyway. But right. I think that we're so far away from approaching zero that it's definitive, like, you know, a measurable number. It's not like you're winning or losing 0.0001 big blinds
right
in these spots. I'm saying it's like definitive, like you're winning or losing like a half a blind based off of what their frequencies actually truly are in real world.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to wrestle with from the online environment to live in some spots where bluffs and bluff catching kind of go hand in hand. So when you know where the bluffs come from, it's very easy to try to assign that to opposition, especially when you hold them in a relatively high regard. But then when you're playing against opposition that don't find them, then scaling back and realizing that some hands perform much worse practically than theoretically in almost all situations over all nodes, playing lower stakes live.
I think
as a default.
I think to zoom out a little bit, the real reason why it becomes such a mind fuck is because there are so many different dichotomies at play. When we're talking about single raise pots on the flop, so like if we start to zoom in a little bit to specifics, single raise pots on the flop, the pool as a whole, in my opinion, overbluffs. They c-bet too much, right? Like this is a common leak. It's for sure happening in every game around America. Now, I'm not saying everybody c-bets too much. There are certainly people who check way too much, but even the weakest players in the world have figured out how to c-bet, right? And generally speaking, they just c-bet too often for too small. But if you then look at like 3-bet pots, I think that they are slightly under bluffing on flop, perhaps.
Yeah,
Right?
where I would quickly chime
You're
in.
describing Guapa's entire game right
I'm
now.
trying not to. I'm trying not to laugh. I'm like, yeah, that's me.
Where I would chime in when it comes to most situations, most people don't 3-bet enough to begin with anyways, so it's hard to have the not good hands when you don't even have them in the first place.
Right.
I agree.
Right. And they're just like very happy to check back on 3-3-2 with ace king,
Ace queen, ace king. Yeah, 100%.
right? Like they just don't c-bet that spot enough. They don't have range bets in 3-bet pots. Every single flop in a 3-bet pot for the average player in the live pool splits between bet and check.
Man, it's kind of crazy because like if you're coming from like playing online and then like you come to a live situation, you get to extrapolate this out. Like, it's insane. It kind of can just like drive you nuts because like you play online for a year with bluff catching, you just you do it by numbers, and then you go play live, and there's just this guy that's never bluffing flop in a 3-bet pot, and it's like, all right, what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
This puts you in some weird situations.
Well, I think what also makes it weird is that, again, the actions aren't uniform. So I can say that live pools across the board on the aggregate under bluff, for sure. But when you dig deeper into the data or my observational data, I would say across the board, flops and turns are bluffed appropriately or over bluffed. So your bluff catchers overperform early in the hand and get absolutely torched whenever the pot is massive and you're facing a bet on the river.
Agreed.
Which is really fucked for you as the defender, because if you start overfolding one of the earlier streets in order to strengthen your range when you arrive at river, you're actually torching money because your hand is greatly overperforming based off the fact that they're at or above their bluffing frequency on the earlier streets, right? Like so often I see guys that I don't think are ever capable of bluffing, guys who when they have all the natural bluffs in the world, like the flush draw missed, the open ender missed, the backdoor flush draw missed, all of these things missed, and they just check down like 9 high on the end.
Yeah.
When they can't find the natural bluff on the river, it means they don't bluff the river, right?
Yeah.
But when you see the hand that they checked down and realize that it was like a 0 equity hand on flop and turn, it was like, 5 high or 6 high, like 6-5 high on ace king 10, and they just went bet because good cards came for them, right? Like, oh, it came ace king 10 high, so I'm gonna bet, and then the turn is like a king, so they're like, oh, I'm gonna bet again, and then the river's like a deuce, and they just shut it down and show the 6 high. Maybe that's not the best example because it wasn't like a lot of things miss for the opposition, but the whole point I'm getting at is when they miss the natural bluffs on the end, it's very unlikely that they have any, if anywhere near the correct amount of river bluffs, but they'll take their air balls and just go hard with them earlier because they have a tight image or they're accustomed to people folding. This is Phil's game in a nutshell.
Also, when you get to the river, like we're bluffing for stacks.
Right.
So it's like that resonates with people.
Yep.
And like that go on.
And there's the memory of them always having it.
Yeah. Right. They always have it.
They really do.
I didn't know where you were going with that.
It's just every time you have ace five reduces, Landon.
It's the weird.
It
It's, well,
depends.
here's like the actual thing. In all honesty, when it comes to the whole bluff catching, bluffing, this that, like rocketing off chips, is it works until it doesn't, and then when it doesn't, you kind of sometimes get buyer's remorse. But at the same time, you kind of have to remember where you came from.
Pancakes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was just a picture of you looking at pancakes, like you
And
look
now
at
and now the
nothing
plate
else.
is completely gone.
Yeah, I was hungry.
You-
I didn't get to eat yet. Somebody was we were running a little bit late.
Well,
today.
also I think too, it's like if you look at, this is like the live thing, right? And you know your player, like if you bet twice, you narrow his range so much that they do just have it by the time it gets to the river, especially if you're betting like rather large.
Man, I remember one of the first things that I was told was when people call big bets on the turn and the river doesn't change anything, so basically a static river, the amount that you are likely to get called is higher by a long shot than if the board state changed.
Right.
Because if they didn't believe you prior, why would they believe you now?
Yeah.
Right? They make up their mind for the river decision based off of
Some do.
the turn.
Some say like,
Do
wow,
you-
he really fired the river. I guess
Do
he
you
does
believe
have
that
it.
still be true, Landon?
I believe it to be true when you're playing in an environment when people don't want to put themselves in tougher spots later, especially for higher stakes. So call it later in MTTs as well. When it comes down to, oh, if I call here, I'm putting in X amount of chips. I only have X amount of blinds, where if I call this and then have to fold on the end, I'm now left with nothing. So they kind of make that decision on the turn of, okay, if I call and the river's a blank deuce and he goes all in, I've prepared for this and I'm going to call, even though sometimes I might tank for 3.5 minutes and then call it. I've prepared to allow myself to have this situation.
Yeah.
Because I know so many times, like just empirically through personal evidence, where people will fold hands that definitely have to bluff catch the turn because they don't want to face the river jam, right? Because facing the river jam is scary. And then you get left in this potentially indifferent spot in theory, where in practice, there's like, well, I didn't believe you then. And there's all this chips in the middle. Stand taking time.
Click the call button.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that has not changed. Usually when somebody calls the big bet on the turn, the board doesn't change. It's like you got the all right, here.
Yeah, you can. I call it drama call. Right? They make up the situation. It's like, oh my god, I can't believe you did it. I knew you were gonna go all in, and I called the turn. So because I called the turn, I call you now. And it's like, well, okay.
I called the turn so I can call the river.
Literally, it's true.
It's a weird spot.
I've heard people say these exact words to me. Sorry.
No, of course.
Like, I call the turn, so I have to call the river. It's like, no, you don't.
Please don't take it back.
I have deuces, man. Please don't do this.
That's why that was like one of my big pushbacks against geo-sizing whenever it was first introduced to me. It like came across of like, well, I don't think you guys understand the live state of affairs where people feel pot stuck.
Wow, do you still feel this way?
No, because now I realize that people are scared. And even though I triple off more than anybody, and even though they hate to fold to me, they're still afraid of. So, like, yes, I feel this way if we're talking going Geo 3 and it's third.
Okay.
Like, if you're trying to bluff any of those streets, you're an idiot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you should. If you're trying to, if you want value, go third, and if you want to bluff, just jam for pot and a half. Because like,
yeah,
you know, they're each going to perform to your best benefit in that regard. But whenever you're going like Geo 2, where it's like 3/4, or pot, a lot of times they call with hands on the turn that they know they have to call with because they're desperately expecting you to shut down. And when you don't, they think like, oh, he's laying me such a good price and still didn't shut down. He must just have what he's saying he has. So it does come down to, you know, in the live realm, there's the psychology around the money. it still comes down to the dollar amount. I've seen situations where I've had to like, or I thought I had to like GO3 something in order to ensure that that final big bet dollar wise would get called, and even still it would like yield a fold. So like when that third bet is like $100,000 for instance into a pot of like 200, so you went half pot, and that final bet is 100K. They don't realize it's half pot anymore. There's some sort of mental barrier or psychological barrier where once the pot has reached a certain size, the percentage of the pot is no longer relevant. All that's relevant is the dollar amount.
It's just a stack of flags.
Can you quickly just explain GO3, GO2?
Yeah,
Sure.
sorry. So geometric sizing is. Oh, yeah, Lametta, go ahead.
This is what he's waiting for. He's been waiting for this moment his entire life.
The way I understand it is that your a geometric size is you're betting the exact same percentage of the pot each street to be all in by the river. So if it's GO3 and it's it would be like a third. It depends on what the stack to pot ratio is, and then you would bet, say, third. That third pet or third percent or 33% on the river would be all in, and then a GO2 would just be two streets.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
He's done it.
Let's fucking go, Tortua.
I know a few things.
Hold on. Explain this to me. So GO2 means it would go flop and then you're all in on the turn?
It depends. It's just two streets, either flop turn or turn river.
Just whatever two streets there are.
Right, because sometimes in MTTs you'll have a spot, or even in cash, where you have like a range bet for small, and then your turn size is just GO2 or check. So you're just trying to be all in by river for the same amount of proportion of pot.
Okay, so just because you're using geo sizing doesn't mean that it happens on the river. It can happen on the turn.
Yeah, it could be flop turn or turn river if it's GO2.
Literally,
if it's GO3, it's flop turn river.
Literally less than a year ago, one of you put like 3E in the chat, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, what do you guys speak in this language?
Yeah.
Now we know.
You don't know now.
Yeah,
you know.
and to be clear, like, you're not rigid to the strategy, right? So like just because you pick a geo sizing doesn't mean that it has to go in sequence. I could pick GO2 on the flop for, like, let's say half pot, where I'm setting myself up for a half pot shove, and then the turn comes in a board texture changing way where maybe I want to trap, or maybe I don't want to be all in, whatever, and I check, right? You still have the option to check as an alternative size, and you still have the option to jam the later street. Like, and the strategy is just set up, like, it doesn't have to be sequential. It's just giving you that future option,
right?
To ensure that the money is all funneled into the middle at some point.
And then the reason for the strategy itself is so your opponent maximizes what he puts in, or
you're just keeping their MDF like relatively the same proportionally,
right?
And it's
maximize their MDF. Right?
Yeah, you're increasing your EV with your overall range in that regard.
What is MDF?
Minimum defense frequency.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be spots in some boards where I've seen this heads up. I've seen this in 6 max cash, and it'll be the same. Just because when it comes to SPR, stack depth, and ranges, that's just how the game works. So it doesn't really matter which format. Where there'll be some spots where you want to play a GO2 or check, and then a turn comes, call it like a high overcard, like an ace in some spots, where now you don't want to jam anymore because it doesn't really benefit for the GO2 strat, where you actually just use GO2 again for the later two streets. So instead of choosing like the block size, if the block is 25 or 20, it might like going 20%, 20% based off a bigger flop size. So you actually use GO2 twice, but GO2 is different sizes, where on flop, it's like pot and a little bit, and then turn, it's small, because now you're just trying to represent the top end portion of your range that doesn't need protection anymore.
Yeah, we're going down a rabbit hole
We're
here.
in the weeds.
This is very inside baseball, so hopefully there are people in the audience who appreciate it, but I want to bring it back to the general conversation and the general audience. So if we're in an environment where we can understand that people just don't bluff enough, and our bluff catchers then get torched through calls, what's the alternative?
Don't bluff catch.
Well, that's sure, but like, you still have that whole subset of hands, right? Like, you still have a big collection of hands that have reasonable equity and would like to get to showdown.
Was there a question here?
Yeah. What's the alternative to bluff catching?
Bluff
Raising.
catching?
Yeah, I think
Raise,
that's I think that's the strategy that like prints the most.
Yeah.
Is if you're in an environment where everybody's trying to blue line to death and no one bluffs enough, then red line them to death.
Yeah.
I think the appropriate counter strategy is to develop exploitative raising strategies. So check raise way more aggressively, 3-bet much more aggressively. 3-betting in particular because I don't think people understand how much of your win rate comes from these bloated pots. And the big thing about live is that people respond very erratically to 3-bets. Like they don't follow some sort of pre-programmed chart as far as like, oh, I'm in this position and I face a 3-bet from that position, therefore this hand does X, Y, or Z. It's so much more. Right, true. But it's so much more about the comfort of the actual hand that they possess, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, ace jack off makes me really sad because when I make a pair, I don't know what to do with it. But ace deuce suited feels really nice because I can make the nut flush. And they kind of fold the stronger, call the weaker type of thing, which inherently isn't terrible. You know, if you look at 3-bet defense, it's obviously going to lean on suited cards over non-suited. But at some point there becomes a line, right? If you're raise folding ace jack from like the cutoff, you're absolutely getting obliterated by a good player's 3-bet range. Now you might be doing fine against nits.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are we talking live poker?
well, here's the thing though, like, and this is a fight I've been having for the better part of a decade with, you know, guys like Chin who are a little bit stickier or a little less sticky, I should say, and want to have control. Like Christian's understood this lesson from day one. Don't bluff catch. And if I'm not going to bluff catch, then I need to have stronger hands so that I can play a more aggressive counter strategy and raise more. And I've always thought the opposite, because what also comes in a world where people don't bluff enough is you getting to overrealize through their passive lines. So if they don't bluff enough, then they don't bet enough, period. Right? Which means now when I flop a bluff catcher, I don't have to actually bluff catch all that often because I don't face a bet all that often. So for me, it was never like, oh, this guy's a super nit, I'm dead with ace jack. For me, it was always like, oh, this guy's a super nit and I have 30%. When it comes ace high, I'm going to win a street, but I'm never going to lose 3, right? And sometimes I'll outflop him. Like one of my old rules of thumb was the easiest way to win a big pot is to take a dominated hand to the flop and just like outflop the guy. You know, you have ace jack versus ace king, comes ace jack high, it's over. Like you just stack. And I'm not saying that that's a reason to play trash hands or anything along those lines.
Right.
But it's more so like an underlying reason to not under defend just because somebody's tight. Like yesterday, the accountant 3-bet queens. And or actually, I don't even think he 3-bet. I think he just opened queens. Let me think. Sizing. No, he squeezed. That's right. It was like raise and a bunch of calls. He squeezed to like 1800 from the big blind, and Phil in the straddle just jammed for like 18,000. And like these are the spots where you just fucking get Helmuth because he can't have enough good hands.
Yeah.
Like he just has jacks. He just has ace queen. He just has like worse so much. And the accountant folded because of Phil's image, where it's like, no one else I would fold this to. And he shows him 2 queens. And he's like, but you, like, I know that you're capable of jamming aces and kings here where nobody else would. They would just 4-bet non all in, whatever. And he mucks, right? And it's like, no, Phil's the guy that you call because he jams, like, he doesn't jam appropriately. You're correct. But he also is going to overvalue certain hands because of his image. So he just has ace queen of diamonds there and was like, you know, just all in for 180 big blinds.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
Fuck. Never mind. There's something I wanted to say and I completely forgot now.
It happens.
Well, not often with Conrad.
What, the fact that I wanted to say something or the fact that I forgot?
It's rare. I think it's rare for you for a thought to enter your brain and not make it to the mic. Like there isn't much of a passing through process there.
Well, yeah, there was, because I didn't want to throw you off while you were saying your hand history. So I was gonna say, this is what you're talking about. Like this is where like a high part of your win rate comes from, though. Like just out flopping people in these type of spots, also. Like you just make money here.
In the blue line sense, yes. Right? Like if you're in an environment that's too passive and people don't bluff, then you make all of your money by out flopping them where you have better value, right? Or sorry, let me rephrase. You make all of your money at showdown in scenarios where you just have out flopped them, generally with a hand where pre-flop they were ahead. Because that's the nature of live poker. People don't understand the complexity of no limit hold'em strategy and the moving parts and how equities will shift from pre-flop to flop to turn to river, right? They just have this fixation on, I had a really good hand before the flop, therefore it's still going to be a good hand post flop, et cetera, you know? And there tends to be this overvaluing of what would fall into the good equity hand class instead of, you know, the highest equity hand class. So yeah, at showdown, when you're blue lining people, it's just going to be because you have top two versus their top pair. You have, you know, bottom set versus their overpair, something along those lines, whatever. But when you're talking about redlining them, what you're actually doing is forcing them into a situation where they always fold their bluff catchers, which is true because they're conditioned to an environment where nobody bluffs enough either. So they always fold their bluff catchers. They always fold the hands that are breaking even. And then they also don't know what to do with a lot of the hands that are actually printing money. So what ultimately happens, and this is why Landon was talking about getting drama called on the end, they don't know the general hand rankings because they're not accustomed to playing against an equilibrium strategy. They're accustomed to playing against an imbalanced strategy that does not have bluffs, which means now that top pair bad kicker is merely a 0 EV hand that, you know, only value cuts somebody whenever they go for it with like an under pair.
Yeah.
Or whenever they turn a non-bluff into a bluff, like they just have like third pair that they decided to blast away with.
I think what happens in most environments that are relatively smaller and especially live, and I'm sure there's some social pressure
You mean smaller stakes?
of having a bluff and then like feeling like they're stupid if they get bluff caught or look dumb in relation to people having eyes on them. But what happens naturally, at least from what I've seen over the X amount of live MTTs and just cash in general, is that ranges are kind of too polarized, where people are going to go for it with the top end. But the problem when it comes to ranges being too polarized and not having the bluffs, the hands that in theory are definitely still beating some value, where in a spot like Ace King in theory on a board that has like 3 Broadway cards might just still go for a triple, where it doesn't actually end up happening in practice. These hands that do well in theory bluff catches, call it like a 2 pair, like a queen 10 on an ace queen 10 type of board, don't actually function as well. And you can kind of extrapolate and feel that out in game, where you kind of have these hands that you know are good but aren't great, where most of the time on the equity threshold, people have the great hands and your good hands don't actually function very well as the bluff catch.
All I'm hearing is that Landon is a field player.
Sounds like it.
I mean,
That's
it
all I
really
just
does
heard.
kind of
Welcome, Landon.
it really
Good
does
to have you
kind
here.
of distill. It distills to the good hand, bad hand game.
Yeah.
It really does. And then you just feel that people don't bluff enough because they don't. It's not really a
Where
feel, right?
do we get our edge then?
Where do we get our edge? We get our edge by folding hands that are supposed to be bluff catches, because you're supposed to call and lose.
Probably
Yeah,
just shaking
honestly,
his
this is
fucking
what
head.
Christian does the best.
This is how you
I
win.
truly-
You win by not losing all of the money. You win because you're supposed to get stacked and you don't. Like you win
Yeah,
because you're supposed to call off 3 streets with like second pair good side card, But you can just be like, you know what? Nah, it's not worth it. I actually don't need to worry about calling here because I'm not getting exploited.
I actually think Christian's world class at this, and I'm not being facetious. I think he's literally one of the best in the world at like being able to feel his way through spots and showing the patience and discipline to lay down bluff catchers at the appropriate times. And I also think it's like very indicative of like who we are as people, like between he and I, in the sense that I think he is a very scarcity type of mindset where it's not that he needs money, but it makes him feel secure. So like he's hungry to move up the stakes. He's hungry to collect all the dollars. He's hungry to ensure that that bank account stays fat, right? Where for me, and like I think that translates to being cautious with like how you spend your money and like not being wasteful, not punting off on first class or amenities or things like that, right? Where like for me, I have always had a very different mindset. I've always been like a very abundance type of mindset where I'll just make more. So I think that these are two separate approaches to the same problem that can both function. And like from my vantage point, it's like I'm just going to try to refine that process of calling and losing to the best of my ability. So like I'm going to call and lose, but I'm not gonna worry about pennies over pounds, so to speak, for us dollars. But you know the English phrase is pennies over pounds. So I'm not gonna worry about pennies over pounds. I'm just gonna understand that there's gonna be an exchange there, and that's not where the bulk of my win rate is gonna come from. And in turn, what I'm going to do is I'm going to steal all of those pennies from everybody else. And that's how I'm going to earn my money. That's how I'm going to ensure that I can keep progressing and keep getting better. So it's the two notions, right? There's two ways to protect your wealth once you have some. Spend less and invest more, or invest more aggressively and have it pay off. Right? Like out earn your expenses. And I gravitate much more to the latter mindset where it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to ensure that I'm playing more big pots than everybody else. I'm going to ensure that I'm bluffing more than everybody else. And then I'm going to try to rein in the bluff catching to a degree where I don't give back so many pennies that they turn into pounds.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't work.
That's true.
What's going on with you today, Burke?
Today I am going to be worrying about pennies over pounds.
Yep.
I'm going to be folding to these goddamn nits all fucking day. Everybody is so fucking tight, man. So tight. They're all so loose pre and so tight post.
I mean,
It's
so you're folding bluff catchers.
ridiculous. Yeah, only after the flop though.
Yeah.
I mean,
before the
good luck
flop
on
or
catching the
fucking
one
in.
jack 4 off fucking punt today.
So there's a great example. I had a hand yesterday that felt very uncomfortable, but in theory is like it's not even a bluff catcher. It's literally value. I opened ace queen off with the queen of hearts, and Sammy 3-bet me from the small blind, I think. And you know, Sammy plays wild. He plays a lot of hands. My hand doesn't ever 4-bet in theory. I maybe can 4-bet Sammy because he's a little bit too wide, but like whatever. We have position. Why complicate things? Let's just go. And it comes king queen 3, 2 hearts. He bets, I call. Turn is the offsuit king. So the queen is the non-heart, and I have the queen of hearts. He bets again for a weird size, like not really indicative of a king size, where I'm like, okay, this is a strange size. Like if he's bluffing, this size makes a lot of sense because he doesn't want to overcommit and run into a king. If he has aces, this hand also, or this bet also makes a lot of sense. But I block aces, and you know maybe they're a little bit more inclined to check. I was like, maybe he could have a worse queen, maybe he could have a king some of the time. I don't fucking know, but I know that I feel semi uncomfortable calling here because he's double barreling on a king queen high king turn board. That most people in 3-bet pots don't do this, but this is the last point that I was going to make is that in general, 3-bet pots are more overbluffed than not overbluffed, but more, there are more bluffing taking place because there's so few hands to pull from the bottom that people just find bets. Right. And And in single raise pots, the pot's small, so they just give up early. But anyway, he fires again, and I was like, okay, like I mean, I just have to have a call here. Like, there's no way I can fold. He could just have worse. So I call. The river's like the 7 of hearts, and he bets full pot. And I was like, all right, I don't know what the fuck's going on here. I don't know. Maybe it's king queen. Like, that's a bad card for him. I would have expected him to check, and instead he's like full potting. And then it just dawned on me. He's like, oh, he had a flush draw. He just had a flush draw and he got there. Like, it's literally that easy. And I fold, and he shows Jack 4 of hearts. So it's like that's the process that I'm talking about, is like where you're investing a lot of money early with these bluff catchers, and then ultimately have to arrive at a fold the times that they either improve or they had it all along. And there's really no getting around it, because folding earlier in the hand here is just an absolute fucking torch. Like, it's just, one of the worst things that you could ever do, I think. But also landing on river and recognizing like, oh, well, I have the queen of hearts. Like, this hand is for sure a mix between probably call and maybe all 3 options, maybe call, fold, and raise. I don't know. But it's certainly not like pure folding or anything along those lines. In practice, you just have a pure fold, man.
Yeah.
In practice, like, if this guy shows you ace jack with the ace of hearts, like, God fucking bless.
Yeah.
It's just not there, but it's there on the flop and turn is the thing.
Yeah, it's
Or at least on the flop.
Live poker in a
Good
nutshell.
fold, Berk.
Yeah, great fold. Fucking pat myself on the back. That was really goddamn tough. But like, I think in a lot of scenarios, like, Christian would find a fold with hand classes of that type on the turn there. Maybe even sometimes because he doesn't want to be into that awkward turn spot. Like, I'm not trying to undermine him when I say this. I truly think that he's world class at knowing exactly where the threshold is with hands that he should continue and hands he shouldn't. But I think that, like, there are certain characters that can potentially fuck with that calibration, right? Like, Hicks is a great example. Eric Hicks seems like a madman, but go back and watch his hands. He just has fucking really good hands the whole stream.
He plays good poker, man. I mean, not good poker, but he plays good poker.
He plays very aggressive. He plays very aggressively. Like, when he's dealt a good distribution of hands, he plays them very well.
Yeah.
He doesn't take any hands off. He doesn't like just look at sixes and say like, oh, I'm going to call this time. No, fuck it. We ball. And it really does cause a big problem for the environment, because now they're forced to do what's uncomfortable, which is bluff catch multiple streets.
Yep. Just straight up disruptor.
He is. I'm going to model my game after this, man.
Good luck.
Do it.
If I model my game after him, I mean, I'm just going to beg for the hand distribution that he's been getting lately.
Please just win
Berkey,
all
how
the
did
money.
you start winning on stream? Well, ever since Madman Eric Hicks came into town, I started watching him play, and it's really done something wonders for me.
Yeah, I just realized if you get dealt ace king a lot more than everybody else, you win a whole bunch of fucking money.
It's true.
It's crazy.
Gotta love it.
You guys have anything else to say about bluff catching in the live arena?
I mean, we could talk about my king queen hand, Guapo. What do you think?
I'd like to know what your
What these wizards think?
what the flop size was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Or sorry, the turn. Was it the turn?
Turn, yeah. This is. I mean, I did land with a bluff catcher, but it is on the turn, and it is online. But it was an interesting hand. So, fold to the small blind. I'm in the big with king queen of clubs, and small blind makes it 3. I'm playing 100 NL, 135 effective. He makes it 3. I 3-bet to 9. He makes it 25. I call. Already not tortoise approved, but it's correct. So flop is king jack 3 2 spades. King jack of clubs, or I'm sorry, I have king queen of clubs. He bets 18 into 50. I guess I have options here. I just call.
Okay, that's what I said.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think it's just call. I in my mind, I mean, my options are call or shove, essentially.
No. You only have one.
I'm
option.
not-
It's just call.
I'm not
right?
saying that I have options as in both are correct. I'm saying I I physically can do that.
Okay, well, you can also
right, I can
fold, but,
fold
like,
too, right?
That's
Yes.
not on the table. So what are we
Right.
talking about here?
Right, okay. So I call. Turn is the 7 of spades, putting 3 spades on the board. And he jams 94 into 84.
Oh,
It's
I
not
can't wait to
close.
see. What is this, Landon?
It's fold. It's not close.
Is it?
Wow.
Okay,
Pure-
so
it's a
yeah,
pure
so
fold.
I'm tanking. I'm thinking. I'm like, okay, well, how like what is his equity? What is my equity? Was a pot laying me, and like this is the difficulty of poker, right? And I think that like, oh, maybe he has enough, like ace queen and ace jack with just the ace of spades that I can call here. Maybe some ace. I mean.
Is this
Yeah,
a
maybe
3-bet pot or 4-bet pot? Sorry.
It's
This
a
is
four. It's a
he
four.
called a 4-bet.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
went.
4-bet pot. 4-bet pot. You're just at bottom.
Yeah.
So you're folding, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you may rather have like queens with a spade. I mean, the thing is that like what's irrelevant here is the flush, right? It's a 4-bet pot, so nobody really has flushes. But the problem is that you're so dominated when it comes to pairs that you having king queen is about as good as you having king deuce.
Yeah.
So your kicker's pretty
Right.
irrelevant here.
Right. Yes.
You know,
I mean,
he's gonna have
I blocked
some king jack.
I blocked some ace kings. Right.
Yeah, but like he's even gonna have like I mean, I guess you block one combo of it, but he's even gonna have like some king jack suited
yeah.
in his 4-bet range.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he'll have ace king, he'll have aces. You block queens, which is really bad. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Landon's right. He just doesn't have enough bluffs here. He's not gonna have
Yeah.
ace jack off.
So
You're not gonna
it's-
see ace jack with the ace of spades.
No, probably not, huh?
No.
So I end up calling, and he has the ace jack with the ace of spades.
God, I love poker.
So
that actually
yeah,
true?
I was like, I thought about like, it's funny because
Wait, is
Guapa
that
said the
actually
same
true? Is
thing.
that what
Guapa
he
was like,
had?
he never does it with
Yeah.
ace jack with the ace of spades.
I fucking love poker so much.
Well,
And so he,
Well,
so
I mean,
I found
to be fair, it's not that he never does that. When he has ace jack with the ace of spades post flop, he for sure does that on the turn. I'm
Right.
saying that like he just shouldn't have that in a 4-bet pot.
Well, he should. Ace jack off is a 4-bet there.
Blind versus blind.
Wait,
Yeah, blind versus.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
small
I thought
blind,
the
big blind
formation was
Berk.
different. My apologies. My bad.
Yeah, it's blind versus blind.
Okay, then yeah, okay. Now you're not as far down in your hand ranking as my
Right.
bad. I wasn't listening to the formation.
I still don't know.
Landon
if
still
calling,
says fold.
Yeah, still don't know if calling's the thing, but
Yeah, but just
Yeah,
call
I
his
said
king
it was a
queen
fold
off
as
with a
well.
spade. Just have a spade, have more equity just in case. Block
Yeah.
the flushes if he has the one spade hand. But I don't think his range wants to play like this at all when he has jams on the turn because all of his flushes that he does have don't want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of his hands with the spade don't want to do this either because he wants you to be indifferent if you just have like red jacks.
Right.
Right. Where now if it's not red jacks,
Or,
but red,
no. Yeah.
Red
whatever
queens.
the
Red
not
queens
pair
or-
is, or you have
yeah.
ace jack.
Or yeah.
You have ace jack suited and he does this. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, good job. Right.
Yeah,
But-
I'm on your side, Lamanna. So this is like the difference between Christian and I as well. So like Landon trends a little bit towards Christian's side of things. I'm on your side though, like where he just should be playing 0 jams. Like he actually should be GO2ing on that card a lot if he's gonna bet. When he should be playing no jams and he jams, like I just trust that they're gonna find enough naked spades.
That's what I thought. That's exactly what I thought. Yeah.
I thought the formation was very different where he was like a lot tighter.
No. Right.
I would just have king queen
Yeah.
with a spade and call. Anyways.
it's
He hit the spade. Obviously.
seems like a fine line.
But that's here nor there.
Well, glad you got fucked.
You try not to be such a tortoise, and then you just find that one hand that they have that you beat, and then they get there.
Well, that's kind of the issue, right? Like that's why.
That's why it's a fold because it's the one hand that you
Well,
beat. Yeah.
it's
But it's
very,
not the one hand.
It's
but
a very
few.
rare
Right.
situation to have the one spade combos as is, and even if you are right that they have it, they still have a ton of equity, which they still get to win. Where with you have a spade, you block it yourself, and it's more likely you're going to win anyways. And it's a bigger pot as is 135 effective than 100 or 50 or
Yeah.
whatever. Right?
Right.
All right. Well, I'm going to attempt to not get fucked. I'm going to attempt to not get fucked today myself. Thank you. Thank you. Much obliged. I got onto a hot start yesterday. I was up almost 40,000 and ran into a couple of shit spots.
Yep.
Yeah, I bluffed once where it should have worked. I had 10-7 of clubs where I big bet the turn, got called in 2 spots on like it was king 8-6, 2 clubs, and it checked through. Turn was an ace. I big bet, got called by the big blind in the original razor, which was Sammy on the button. And then the river was an offsuit 7. And it's like, okay, well, exactly nobody has 9-10 because I have the 10 of clubs. And who the fuck would peel for pot on the turn with a gut shot and no clubs? Nobody, of course. So I bet pot, and the accountant had fucking 10-9 offsuit and just like beat me in the pot. Like, okay, well, that's 10K I'm never getting back. Fuck me.
Yeah.
This is
I
why
saw that was like one of the few hands that I watched yesterday. I was just like, oh god. And
this is why it does not pay to bluff ever.
Yeah.
Or to think ever.
Don't think.
But yeah, I mean, whatever. I'm gonna keep it swinging, man. I'm not gonna tighten up today. Like, eventually they'll not have it.
Let's fucking go.
Right, let's get it.
Let's win 100 racks today. What are you playing? 100, 200?
I don't know, man. We played 50, 100 yesterday. I'm guessing it's gonna be a similar lineup today with Robbie in and Masato and a couple other guys out.
All right, get the straddles going.
But yeah, we're gonna have to work in those straddles. We'll see. Maybe 100, 200 tomorrow. I think Jungle Man's coming back tomorrow, so we'll see. Jesus Christ. Is that the worst Macho Man Randy Savage impersonation you've ever seen in your entire life?
I didn't see it. All I saw was Hunt's tweets telling me about how bad it was. And if Hunt says it's bad, it's got to be bad, right?
It was bad. It was so bad that, like, I don't think I do a good Macho Man, but I couldn't take it to the point where he lost a big pot versus Hicks. And then I trolled him in Macho Man's voice.
Did he knock over your chips?
No. Then he tried to, like, re-Macho Man me back, but just sounded like somebody who was struggling to string together words. Like, oh, Berkey, you've been losing. And
comparatively speaking.
Comparatively speaking.
Bingo.
Well, that's going to do it for us here, brother. The Macho Man Dan is going to be in action again tomorrow. We're going to head out of here down to Live at the Bike, 50-100 with Robbie J. Lou and the Jack 4 suited. It's going to be in play today. So I'm going to go try to cash a check. We'll see you guys all tomorrow, 11 a.m. I'm going to see if I can maybe do the podcast from the actual Live at the Bike studio. We'll see.
That'd be great.
Berk.
Yep.
Unless the bounty is big, don't do it.
I'm out. I'm fucking out. Don't worry. We had the 7 deuce bounty on yesterday. Nobody won with it. I didn't even attempt it.
Yeah.
I just mucked.
Just don't do it. Just make him do fucking something abnormal. Like, I don't know, 5K person.
Yeah, you just
or
catch,
just
you
don't do it.
You just catch the punt. That's all.
Oh,
right.
Yeah, brother. Just punt, brother.
Well, good luck today,
all right,
Berk.
all you little Hulkamaniacs, say your prayers, eat your vitamins. We're out.
Later.